All right, welcome everybody to the Lakers Legacy Podcast, where Father Time, Father Christmas, Father of the Bride, Father of the Braun Jr., whichever father you subscribe to, I think most Lakers fans will agree. It's about Mother Father Time. The Lakers figure out who they truly want to be for this 2024-25 season and make some moves. I'm your host, Jonathan Hernandez, and today, speaking of fathers, we've got the father of Lakers Twitter with us today.
Oh, get out of here.
Longtime father friend of the podcast. You know him as Laker Father Film Room, Mr. Pete Zayas. Pete, it's been too long. How are you doing?
Been way too long. The very first podcast I ever did a guest appearance on was the Lakers Legacy podcast. I had pages of notes and was ready to go. I do not have pages of notes today, but they're up here.
You don't need them, Pete. You are well seasoned at this point, like LeBron James. Yeah. So I don't know why it's been so long, Pete. I'm gonna chalk the time in between up to the cloud that was the pandemic and the Russell Westbrook era. I think a lot of things were going on in each of our lives, and in hindsight, though, I think I regret not having you back the moment that we traded for D'Angelo Russell,
Uh-huh.
because our
Yep.
podcasts are so intrinsically linked to D'Angelo Russell.
Uh-huh.
For those who don't know, like about 6 years ago, a
Oh
very
God.
angry listener personally emailed me to give me his very candid thoughts on D'Angelo Russell. And I posted that email on Twitter because I found it amusing. And then Pete got a hold of it. And when he read the email, he thought it looked like song lyrics. So he created a song to it, put it to piano, and sang his own operatic rendition of the now famous I Believe That D-Lo Is Slow song that will forever live in the internet ether. I don't know if you even still have that on private.
It's around there somewhere. It's like unlisted or something, but every once in a while someone will request it and be like, "Hey, what was that D-Lo song you did?" It was a glass of wine and very amused by the tweet, and it was like a whole, moment of inspiration.
Well, I believe that D'Lo is slow and plays no defense, never has and never will. And very fittingly, those are still kind of the same sorts of replies I get from fans regarding D'Lo to this
Time
day.
is a flat circle, Jonathan.
Time is a flat circle, and as D'Angelo Russell yelled to the crowd 2 years ago, it's like he never left, but like in all the worst ways when it comes to the fan sentiment. But anyways, in today's episode, Pete, we are at a natural quarterly review point for the Lakers with the IST Cup this week. So in this episode, I kind of just wanted to run the gamut with you of all the prevalent Lakers topics we can get to and do a little round robin mailbag Q&A session to see where you stand on certain talking points right now. And then during the second half of the show, if we have some time, I'd love to talk some trade deadline stuff with you and get your thoughts on some specific trade targets. But why don't we start things off swinging, Pete? I'm going to hit you with like a very specific question. Usually I like to go general and macro, but we're just going to go right into it. Um, how confident are you that the Lakers are going to make moves this season? And what percentage would you put your confidence level at on that likelihood? And you can caveat your answer however way you want to.
I think there's about a 65% chance the Lakers make a move, but I think there's about a 70% chance that it's a little disappointing if they do. It's a little convoluted to answer, but basically the way I see the back end of this roster, and we'll talk more about the specifics, I think, in the second half, is a lot of the expiring vet mins and things like that, JHS. There's a certain amount of salary you can get up to for a 10, 15 million-ish dollar player, where I think that if the Lakers trade for like hey, that's a good eighth man type of guy, Laker fans are going to be kind of pissed off. So I think there's going to be a move, but I think it's likelier it's that type of move than a big splashy one.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you my percentages. They're not going to add up to 100, but I'm 99.1% sure that they're going to make 2 or 3 moves this summer. The amount of expiring contracts, like you said, that they have on their books almost necessitates that they do something. Now, to your point, whether they're big splashy move, they're the big splashy moves that fans want, I'm not sure. So I think I'm about 99% sure that they at least make 2 or 3 margin moves. Um, at the same on the other side of the token, I'm like 60% sure that they use one of their first to make an upgraded version of the 2023 Russ trade, where they got back several pieces in D'Lo, Vando, and Beasley. At least that's the hope, right? I'm 60% sure that they'll do that. I'm more 99% sure that they're at least going to do something. At the same time, I'm also 99% sure that they're not using both first round picks this deadline. Are you in that
Mhm.
same agreement?
I think so, just because if you go through the league, there isn't really anyone available where it's like, yeah, I'd trade 2 first for that. I have, and I don't think the Lakers are against trading them,
Right.
but again, if you look at the available players, it's like, do you really want to trade 2? Like, I don't want to trade 2 first for Jeremy Grant personally.
No. Yes,
You
correct.
know? So
Yeah.
if you go through the names, like, in concept, yeah, let's do it. Let's trade the picks, but there aren't really a lot of really exciting names in that respect.
For sure. And I don't know if it's like folly on my part, but I do really think that things are going to play out like they did in 2023 when the Lakers traded for Rui. Then they used their first to dump Russ and get D'Lo, Vando, Bees. I think they're looking for an upgraded version of that where they get multiple like mid 20s players. If
Sure.
you want to look at it another way, it's kind of like what the Mavs did with Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. When they traded for both, they were 25 years old. They did give up first round picks for each of them. They're not the same sorts of firsts that the Lakers have, because the firsts that the Lakers have are the non LeBron James, maybe non Anthony Davis first round picks that are pretty premier. So we'll see what happens. I do want to point out though that, and a lot of people have overlooked this fact because they feel a certain way about Rob Pelinka, and I don't blame fans. But when Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick had their like State of the Union address a week before media day, um, Rob was asked what he would do with those first round picks, right? And there was one thing that Rob said that I really clung on to that I think people have conveniently glossed over. But Rob Pelinka made it a point to say in that presser that with regards to trading the picks, he said, we are open to also trading one of those first for marginal players. He did not
Mm,
say a max player. He did not say we're only going to trade a first round pick for a move the needle all-star player. He said we're open to trading that first for marginal players. And I think that type of mindset is right. And
I do too.
literally that the last trade he did was for marginal players: D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley. So that's, am I foolish to be hoping for that same thing?
I don't think you're foolish. The one thing I would say that's different about this than 23 though is the Lakers had 66 million in
Yes,
expiring contracts between Westbrook, Beverly, and Nunn.
correct.
And really now it's D'Lo, who I don't really want to trade, honestly. If we could talk about that a little bit later.
Sure.
And then it's really all of the guys that have some level of salary ballast to them are on multi-year deals. You're talking
Hmm.
from Max all the way up through who's the highest paid guy in that crew. Is it Rui? You know,
Yep.
so that, all of those guys have at least another year. So there has to be some degree of the other team actually liking the player, which
Right.
there are deals available in that respect, but it's a little different than in 23 where you can just be like, oh, you can clear Mike Conley off the books. You don't
Yep.
need him, Utah, and you get a first round pick back in return. Like it's not quite the same thing.
For sure. And I think that's going to require Rob and his staff to do a little bit more creative money balling to try and find the right lower salaried players that I think the one thing that the reason why I always go back to 2023, a lot of fans are mad that we didn't make any deadline moves this past deadline. But, expiring contracts are usually the currency of choice outside of draft picks during these deadlines. And the one expiring contract that the Lakers had at the deadline was the coach's favorite player in Torian Prince. So he like that was $4.5 million expiring. Like the Lakers weren't going to trade that. And so this year, I'm encouraged by the fact that at least, like, if you look at Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood, Cam Reddish, D'Angelo Russell, JHS isn't expiring. Like at the very least, if you combine all those together with regards to expiring, what you get to like 26, 29 million expiring. So you can get a player who's worth that much or get several players who are in like the 10 to 15 $1 million range. So that's what I'm hoping for now that the Lakers once again have like a myriad of smaller expiring deals, and by December 15th they can aggregate as many veteran minimum contracts as they want to, which they couldn't do this past summer. So that's what I'm kind of holding out hope for. And we'll get to like some trade targets. We'll loop back around to this trade talk in the second segment, but yeah, let's move on to my next question, Pete. um, did we pull the plug on the AD, LeBron, Rui, D'Lo, AR starting unit too quickly, or at least pull the plug on making sure that those five guys are prioritize minutes wise in tandem with each other too quickly. And I'll caveat things by saying I'm not even saying that making D'Lo as a sixth man is the wrong move in the long run. And we can have a larger discussion on D'Lo's role later. But I'm kind of just asking, as this team is currently constructed, as banged up and lacking in depth and talent as they currently are, should we maybe have stuck this out a little longer and leaned into the offense the way that we did in the second half of last season? Because the defense hasn't really gotten that much better in this stretch, if at all, while the offense has definitely gotten worse in this last stretch. So, like, what are your thoughts on that OG starting lineup? I think the OG starting lineup obviously involves Vando, but with regards to the last year, should JJ Redick have stuck it out a little longer when he made that flip at 4-4? Or are you okay with the flip?
I'm still okay with the flip, and I think that the appropriate role for D'Lo is coming off of the bench.
Sure.
I also think it's very possible that that ends up being the best starting lineup, and they've tried a bunch of different other ones, and that ended up being the best one that they have. My argument for it is more about if LeBron or D'Lo is out of the game, our offense sucks,
Yep.
and that it's hard to get a substitution pattern if both LeBron and D'Lo are starting, where you don't have 5-minute patches of the game where it's like Gabe and Max in the backcourt. So it's actually more. And I know it sounds like it's a demotion, right? Like you go from a starter to a bench type of group. I think that both LeBron needs another high end like point like guard on the floor with him to start the second and fourth quarters so that you can have D'Lo in that group too. And AD needs a dance partner as well in his minutes. So it's actually more about like D'Lo. We're so much better when D'Lo's on the floor with offense,
Mhm.
or offensively, that starting group can't. Now they haven't been, but I believe Jonathan that they can be good on offense. With the talent that they have, and they need to kind of move things around a little bit without D'Lo. But the bench groups, that if you get too many of the Gabes and Maxes and Cams on the floor all at the same time, Koloko, too many bad offensive players together, it's rough. So it's more about
Mhm.
that while fully acknowledging. And I also wanted to see them like, hey, let's try out a few different groups. I think this group has a ceiling. You need at least somebody who can guard on the perimeter. I think.
Right.
Do we have that player? Maybe not.
Yeah, I think I agree with you as well. I did have a follow up question with regards to this 5-man group. Now, obviously, the circumstances are much different from the second half of last season when they were running on fumes and they were trying to get to the playoffs and everything was clicking. But I think that was the hope, right? Starting that OG group that JJ Redick did, that they would kind of hit the ground running and eventually get back to that level. I don't think we were ever getting back to the ceiling that they hit because, I mean, we were one of the only starting lineups last season in the second half of the season, Pete, that had 5 starters averaging 16 plus points. Like
Yeah, it was
Rui,
crazy.
D'Lo, AR, all of them averaged 16 plus points. We were also one of the only starting lineups to have 3 players averaging 6 plus assists. D'Lo,
Wow.
AR,
Hmm.
LeBron. We
Hmm.
were also the only starting lineup to have 3 players shooting 41% from three on high volume in Rui, LeBron, and D'Lo. So obviously we are reaching the high end of the spectrum of what that group can do, and to expect that to start a season off is probably folly. But I don't know, part of me is like, what do you think are the differences outside of the adrenaline kick and the motivation to want to make the playoffs? Do you think that we could have ever reached that point if, let's say, maybe this roster was a little bit more healthy and it didn't crater when one of LeBron or D'Lo left the
Sure.
floor? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one, I think that if Vando's in the mix, that even if he's coming off of the bench, it helps because like Redick's concept with a lot of the bench unit is, hey, I'm going to put a lot of my best defensive guys out there, but
Mhm.
they're either small or lacking offensively in ways that like Vando's a guy on defense. Like he's a legit. If you want to be that, he can help you help you get there. And so, in terms of going away from that starting group, like I do think that they could have gelled a little bit more. My main complaint, Jonathan, was the defensive end. And
Sure.
it's like, oh, here's D'Lo ending up. And it was more about the switching. So you can make an argument,
Yeah.
hey, if you just went back to the drop, D'Lo wouldn't be put in these positions where it's like,
Mhm.
you can't guard that guy. But there to me, it's the biggest difference is LeBron. Like
Mm.
LeBron putting the foot on the gas, ready to go to the playoffs. He's been a significantly worse player to start this
Yeah.
season. And I feel like that has sort of a chain reaction effect on all sorts of other things that to me is the big difference versus the LeBron you get post trade deadline and in the, oh crap, we have to make the playoffs now type of push, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just to close the loop on this portion of the talk, right now the OG starting lineup is literally by far the
By
best point
far,
differential lineup.
by
Just
far.
I'll just throw it out there. Out of all 5-man lineups that have played at least 60 possessions, including the other 2 starting lineups we've tried with Cam Reddish and Dalton Connect, the OG starting 5 is the only lineup with a positive overall point differential by far. They are a plus 8.9 through 215 possessions. The Reddish starting lineup is a minus 14.8 through 133 possessions. The Connect at the 2 lineup is minus 17 with Cam at the 3. And then Connect at the 2 with Rui at the 3 is minus 11.1. So, like, literally, it's plus 8.9 versus minus 14.8, minus 17, and minus 11.1. Obviously, we need larger sample sizes.
Yeah, how many minutes or how many possessions has the Connect Rui version played?
Oh, shoot. I did not write it down here. I think it's
Okay.
about like 80 or something, 60 to
Okay.
80. So it's
Yeah,
not too
because
much.
it's gotten a few games, but yeah, not too many.
Not too many. Okay, kind of related to that question. And so I just want to put it out there that I agree with you when it comes to D'Lo's role and the vision that I see for him in the future, if he ever was to fit on a truly contending team, it would be in that Rajon Rondo like bench
Yep.
role, where
Yep.
sometimes, kind of like how Rondo was in the 2019-20 season, sometimes he may even still be your third best player on the night of a game, especially because
Absolutely.
D'Lo is like the 3-point volume shooting version of Rondo, right? Now, I'm sure fans would love D'Lo. It's funny because D'Lo's kind of like reverse Rondo in the sense that he's more reliable in the regular season, and then once the playoff comes,
Oh,
you're like,
sure.
I don't know. Whereas
Sure.
Rondo, that entire season, fans were like, this guy sucks, and then all of a sudden the playoff hits, and it's like, oh yeah, he's playoff Rondo
That's
for a
right.
reason.
Yeah. And he had missed like 6 months at that point too. Remember, he had gotten injured and
That's
didn't come
true.
back right away in the bubble. So he like second round of the playoffs, game 2. You're like in the middle of everything.
I know.
No runway, no lead up. He just he kicks ass.
And he was hitting all of his threes in the playoffs
Mhm.
too, which
Mhm.
D'Angelo Russell sometimes doesn't do. So it's like crazy. Anyways, I agree with you that like the best version of D'Lo, I think, on a championship team is in that 6-man role. And if it seems like he's been accepting of it, but like, and he would actually be one of the best 6-man, in that role. Now, my related question to that is, putting that to the side, the far future, even the future, because we don't even know if D'Lo is going to be on this team. But in the vacuum of right now and on court basketball play, who do you think has better 6-man qualities in your eyes between Austin Reaves and D'Angelo Russell? Because I can make an argument
Ooh,
for
yeah.
both. We
Yeah.
have now seen both in that role these last 2 years. Last season, Reaves was benched for Cam Reddish around the same time, and we rode that lineup switch to the IST championship. This year, D'Angelo Russell was benched for Cam Reddish as well, and we immediately won 6 in a row, but have since stumbled a bit due to a variety of reasons, including losing all of our front court. Now, again, as I mentioned, I understand the thought process behind D'Lo as a 6-man, et cetera, et cetera. But for what this current team needs right now and the way that LeBron James has sort of looked early on, to your point, like LeBron needs D'Lo, AD needs D'Lo, the bench needs D'Lo.
Right. Right.
So, um, it almost makes me wonder if, and I understand also the politics of this. Like, clearly, the Lakers are long for Austin Reaves to the extent that they're long for anyone, and D'Angelo Russell's on an expiring contract. But if you move all of that to the side and just say, let's talk about basketball on the court right
Mhm.
now, who's the best starter for this talent depleted group? If I'm being honest, Austin to me, and this is more of a credit to Austin than anything else, because I feel like Austin's more malleable a
Mm.
player than D'Angelo
Mhm.
Russell. And
Mhm.
I'm
I
not
agree.
saying I don't think D'Angelo Russell has like been very open and accepting of this new role. I just don't think it's clicked within his body and his wiring as a player yet. Whereas Austin has more of that aggressive change of pace scoring nature that's kind of typical of microwave scoring off the bench that you'd get from like a guard a guard like that. And so from a a play perspective, but also mentality wise, to me, Austin seems to just have more of that metal for having his role kind of jigsawed around. Whereas D'Lo, again, while I genuinely think he's been very open to doing whatever it takes to help the team this year, I just think he's still more likely the more likely of the two to get lost in the thick of things
Yeah.
because of how his game is wired. D'Lo is more of a true floor general who has to have
Yes.
a feel for the game first and find that rhythm, which means he needs more minutes. But Austin can just go. And even if he's not scoring, he's doing all the active little things regardless. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on this with regards to who has better six-man qualities in your eyes between the two?
So it's funny. I agree. I was nodding my head throughout your argument, and I agree with so many different elements of it. But the conclusion I come to is less about the role from a starter versus reserve
Mhm,
standpoint, and more of a who is the point guard of the two of them? Like who is the
mhm,
guy that you
mhm.
want to give the ball to? And that's something that's like a no duh type of thing if you're a D'Angelo Russell fan. But I at least wanted to see was at the beginning of the year, I was like, hey, let's try Austin at the one and maybe try D'Lo a little more in that shooter type of role. I remember him doing that a little when he was younger in Byron Scott's motion week offense coming off of screens and loops, right? Where he's got three screens running from one side to another. Hey, let's see what that looks like, type of thing. And then watching this season, I'm like, oh, D'Angelo Russell's a point guard. Which
Uh,
again, yeah, like a no duh type of thing, right? But it's I think after years of a but when he was younger, I saw him as more of a guard. And
sure.
I think now he is more of a like what you were saying about having feel and having a rhythm for the game. I think having the ball is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And when he's at his best, he's beating teams with his mind as much as
Mhm.
anything. Like one thing that pushes me away from Austin as the point guard is D'Lo, if you're hot, he will look for you.
Yeah.
If you've hit a couple shots in a row and he really looks out for others. How much better did Max Christie start playing the
Oh,
moment D'Angelo Russell became his backcourt partner? And how it's
that,
like once a game in transition, they'll be going up the sidelines. D'Lo
yep.
will dribble at him. Max knows just what to do. He's going to back cut, going to get to the line, or he's going to get a dunk off of that. And so Austin has more of a narrow view to
Mhm,
me of how to run a unit. And so to me, if you're going to be that microwave scorer off of the bench, that doesn't describe Austin to me. Austin's a really
mhm.
good overall player, but he's not microwavy enough for him to qualify for like that Lou Williams. Because like the type of guy you're describing to me is Lou Will is one of the
Sure.
patron saints of this type of guy, where it's like give him give a roll man that's really good, and like you other dudes play defense, but we're going to get buckets over and over again and create good shots by just doing this over and over again, at least during the regular season.
Mhm,
And Austin does not, I think, have that level of ability to do it, like to carry a group. Whereas I think D'Lo's ability to organize a group and sometimes get hot himself can really like make the whole group better. So it's funny,
sure.
we have a lot of the same observations,
Yeah.
but for me, it's less about the starting lineup because it's more about that starting unit has LeBron, AD, Austin, and Rui. If y'all can't score, if y'all need D'Angelo Russell to score, what does Gabe Vincent and Max Christie
Right.
and Christian Coloco, what do those guys need to score?
Right.
They're the ones that need help. To me, it's more about LeBron kind of toning down, especially in the start of the game and the start of the third quarter shift. Most nights where it's like,
Mhm.
okay, you shouldn't be the point guard if you're going to be playing at this type of pace. So maybe Austin taking more control during those groups, or at least on the nights where LeBron doesn't really want to hit the gas. But that's more of the way I look at it, while
Mhm.
absolutely admitting that that might be the move. And I'm not against Austin off of the bench. It's more of a
Yeah.
where do we need D'Lo type of thing.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like D'Lo is the most interesting player that I think I've ever covered on the
Yeah,
Lakers. It's like I feel like I'm getting gaslit every day talking about this player because he's either like, yeah, he's the most like he's the worst NBA player we've ever seen who the team actually needs, like on multiple levels.
who just
Anyways,
happens to like massively lead the team in plus minus on
I
multiple
know.
seasons. This isn't just like a 1 year type of thing.
Right, right. What are your thoughts then, extending this question a little bit? So I totally agree with you. I have a slight problem with JJ Redick only letting D'Lo and AD play out there as a tandem for like 2 minutes when LeBron goes to the bench. This is more recent events, but like I wish he would allow them to kind of gain that rhythm a little bit more because it almost defeats the purpose of having D'Lo be the point guard off the bench when after 3 minutes LeBron James is back in the game and then D'Lo kind of concedes and then just retreats to the corner again. Whereas, oh no, but like AD and him were getting into that groove, like can we get a little bit more of that? So, and I guess this like boils into like a larger discussion of like I guess my biggest issue right now is that I don't know why D'Lo is only playing a near career low 27 minutes per game, which is the second lowest of his career. He actually played more as a rookie under Byron Scott, ironically enough. And I understand the limiting of his role if everyone is healthy when we have like the roster set when he's truly six man D'Lo. But and I understand why JJ Redick is kind of deferring more to like energy hustle guys who kind of are his poster boys for this is kind of what we need right now. But if the stats aren't bearing that out and you're still getting blown out and giving up 136 to the Hawks and blowing your coverages on switches, and the offense looks clunky in the process, and all the math says that you need D'Lo in this lineup, and this lineup, and LeBron and AD together as a two-man lineup are a crazy negative. The only time that they are a positive is when you insert D'Lo into that three-man lineup. So having said all of that, I'm just wondering why is he capped so low? Because I personally don't think that on this current roster, not saying in the future when moves are made or whatever, if D'Lo is still here, that he doesn't revert down to being like a 25-minute player off the bench. But on this current roster, it seems like we are not utilizing him to his fullest extent because to your point about what he does for the rest of the guys, Rajon Rondo did this in 2019-20. When he was on the floor, it was almost like he got guys easy dunks like Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee, and then all of a sudden those guys felt more revved up to play defense. It was kind of like a waterfall effect of like, and unfortunately, for better for worse, this roster is just sort of offensively motivated. Like when they are running hot and they've got that groove, and D'Lo really pushes the pace as well. For as slow as he is, he really runs up and down the court. And to your point, that Max Christie play, right? He's like, go, 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 Max, backdoor cut, boom, easy dunk, like even off a made basket, D'Lo's the first one doing that motion, like, let's go, let's go, let's
Yeah,
go.
keep it rolling. Yep.
And so I feel like almost like that trickles down to the defensive end and how everybody is feeling. So for such an important player, is there a reason why he's at almost a career low 27 minutes per game?
To your point, too, if you look at the offensive and defensive rating numbers of the lineups, it's actually our defensive rating that's way better with those starting groups than the offensive rating. Yeah, it's like 104, 105. And what I think a big part of it is he gets the offense so much more organized and like they're playing correctly more often. And so you're going up against our set defense more frequently. And so, yeah, I do think that there is a fundamental misevaluation on some level. Basically, I think they went into the season like I went into the season being like, hey, let's try Austin at point guard and see how it looks, right? And we could always go away from it in 10, 15 games. This is always how I view all the way up through January, the beginning of January at the very least, is figure out what you have. It's the time to experiment. Let's try new lineups. Let's try this guy in a different role type of thing and see what works best. Because this group, for as many years as it's been together, the 2.5 or whatever it's been, it hasn't like tried a bunch of different things because Darvin Ham basically stuck with the same thing for like 50 games and it was like, oh crap, we need to make the playoffs now. I think from the Lakers perspective, they were like, Austin Reaves is our point guard. And that's something that he's done, but I think he's more of a guard, like more, and this to your point earlier, he has more of a complete type of game or has a more versatile type of game that he can move off the ball, he can move on the ball a little bit. And I think that we've kind of shoehorned him into that starting one type of spot that has had that knockoff effect on D'Lo. Now, I think that you have a ceiling ultimately if you play those two together too many minutes defensively in the higher end basketball, which is why I'm for this splitting, right? But D'Lo should still be playing 30 minutes a game, right? You can still get there with that type. Like I want him once LeBron goes out of the game, and I totally agree with your point about when LeBron comes back in. And my question to you on that, though, is there a way to just play differently with the same group on the floor? Does D'Lo have to be pushed over to the corner when LeBron checks back into the game? Or can he be the point guard for the 2-3 minutes and LeBron is the shooter in that group,
I think they have. There was that moment in I forgot which game it was. It might have been the Hawks or the Heat game where LeBron and D'Lo kept forcing that two-man action between them, and LeBron was
Uh-huh.
like, "You use me as the screener, and you take it yourself." And he like got an and one in the lane, and so I feel like there's been a more concerted effort to make D'Lo the point guard when he's on the floor. But I think anytime you have LeBron James always has license to do whatever he
Sure.
wants, for better for
Sure.
worse, do whatever he wants at any moment. And so I don't know. I feel like they can. To me, right now, the answer is JJ Redick needs to. JJ Redick and D'Angelo Russell's relationship is so interesting to me because when I was at the game, I've never seen D'Lo so. He always looks to Redick for validation, and anytime he does anything good, he's always like they're always chatting on the bench.
Uh-huh.
It really does seem like they have a close relationship, but at the same time, I also feel like JJ Redick tends to use D'Lo as the fall guy poster boy for when he does something glaringly wrong. He's
Hmm.
taken either defensively or offensively. And I'm not saying he shouldn't take him out. I just don't think that necessarily extends to everybody on the roster for obvious reasons, because
Uh-huh.
sometimes everybody on the roster includes LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But having said that, to me, I think the answer is for JJ Redick to kind of give a little bit more leash in minutes to D'Angelo Russell so that even when he's out there with LeBron James, yes, he can like scooch over to the corner, but he also has enough minutes to also have the ball while LeBron James is on the court with him. That's my like kind of layman's terms answer for yes. I think part of the answer is obviously making sure that D'Lo is the point guard even when LeBron is there, but also he kind of just needs. D'Lo's a versatile offensive player that needs minutes to gain a rhythm to both be the catch and shoot 3-point shooter or
That's
like
right.
the swaggy P 3-point shooter or the playmaker. And sometimes I feel like we're missing out on both sides where one night we'll get the playmaking version of D'Lo, but he's not aggressive on offense. And you're
Right,
like,
right.
ah, man. And then another nights, you get, oh, he caught fire a little bit, but he only had 2 assists. It's like, which D'Lo do we want? I think to JJ Redick's point, on any given night it's going to be a different player, and on any given night you're going to get a different iteration of the same player, I guess. So I guess we have to live with that, but I don't know if you have an additional answer to your own question.
No, no, I think that covers most of it.
Okay, cool. So why don't we take it to break here? And when we return, I have a couple more questions for Pete, and then I want to get into some of his thoughts regarding some specific trade targets. But before that, Pete, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you know that saying, it's a dog eat dog world?
I do.
Well, when it comes to online fantasy sports betting, it's actually an underdog eat dog world because Underdog Fantasy is the place to play when it comes to daily fantasy sports betting. Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports, compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more players' stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So, in tomorrow's slate of games, the Lakers will take on the Minnesota Timberwolves without LeBron James. I would try and hammer Anthony Davis higher than 29.5 points. He loves going up against Rudy Gobert. The Lakers' game plan will likely be to just feed the beast in AD, so take the higher on AD 29.5 points. So take that bet today, download the Underdog app, sign up and use code LEGACY and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Again, download the Underdog app, sign up and use code LEGACY and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Higher or lower, you make the call. Turn every LeBron James rest day into a win for your wallet with Underdog. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467369. All right, let's take it to our sponsors, and when we return, more with Pete. All right, so we are back. Pete, before we jump back into the Russian roulette Q&A stuff, quick pulse check on the Lakers right now and where they currently stand. Um, Am I wrong to think that the Lakers are in a very crucial fork in the road moment in their season? Because, and it, so if I were to correlate this back to last year, and maybe I'm inhaling too much hopium here, but I think right now this team could either be in a, and maybe they're always in this moment, but I think they could either be in a continue to crater moment or a galvanizing and go moment for the team. And I bring this up because I don't know if I'm 100% accurate on this, but this last 3 game stretch with like the Miami Heat game being the absolute like
Uh-huh.
probably one of the worst Lakers games I've ever seen this group
Brutal.
collectively play in terms from like an effort and like professionalism standpoint. Like, can you
Yeah.
stand up to yourself as a man and look yourself in the mirror
Right.
standpoint?
Right.
It's like, wow, that was terrible. Um, and that's saying something, right? Over the last 3 or 4 years. So I feel like we got way better effort during the Hawks game, and then obviously LeBron James didn't play in the Portland game, and a lot of guys were able to sort of find their rhythm. So this last 3 game stretch kind of reminds me of the 3 game stretch last year when in February the Lakers got blown out on the road in back-to-back games versus the Rockets and
Atlanta.
Hawks
Yep.
in late January, and the vibes seemed bad. They seemed really bad, so much so that LeBron James and AD both sat out the next game versus Boston. And prior to that game, I was texting with Tommy and I was like, I think this season is done. I think LeBron and AD are checked out. Is this their sign of like I give up, you better do something, right? And so all of us chalked that game up as a loss. And and yeah, personally for me, I'm not saying this is what was actually going on in their head. I honestly kind of felt like LeBron and AD had given up on this iteration of the team. But then something miraculous happened. Austin Reaves, D'Angelo Russell, Vando, Rui, and Hayes all kind of went berserk and led a ragtag Lost Boys group to a wire-to-wire win versus the Boston Celtics on the road. And to me, I don't know. This is me projecting. I kind of felt like LeBron and AD were reminded of how talented their teammates were in that
Mm-hmm.
circumstance. And I understand that Boston let their guard down, yada yada. Guys had more usage, whatever. I just feel like in those moments when D'Angelo Russell can remind himself that he used to be an all-star point guard and Austin Reaves can get swaggy again and remind himself that he's him. Rui Hachimura gets the ball, he's able to hit clutch threes. And in that game, even though it led to Vando being out for the rest of the season, I felt like that game philosophically changed the rest of how the the rest of the season for how the Lakers would go about the season. Because after that game, Ham finally woke up and just said, "Wait, maybe I just need to play my best, most talented players the most minutes." And Pete, do you know what happened after that Boston game?
They started winning games.
Well, not only that, that was after that game, Rui Hachimura got his first start
Yeah.
officially at the 3 versus the
Yeah.
Knicks. And they ran with that OG lineup that went 22 and 10, 23 and 10.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not exactly comparing that stretch to this recent stretch with the Miami debacle, the close Hawks loss, and then the Portland game without LeBron. But I do think there are some similarities with regards to, namely, how despondent the team had become, like how and how multiple guys' roles seem to be kind of in flux. But then all of a sudden, there's this game that LeBron sits, and that game kind of allows the other guys to step up and find themselves again. And obviously, beating Boston on the road without both LeBron and AD is way more impactful than beating Portland at home with AD present. And maybe in my example, we can also loop in the hard fought Hawks game into the equation to illustrate sort of this turnaround. But in terms of getting a reminder of how good guys like Rui, D'Lo, and in this recent stretch, even like Max Christie and Cam Reddish and Gabe Vincent can be, I'm at least hoping that the last 2 games after that embarrassing Miami game kind of snaps things back into place for some of the ancillary guys, but also JJ Redick as well with regards to how he utilizes these players, kind of like what we've been talking about at the top with D'Lo and Austin. Anyways, this is all this rambling to say, how crucial is this next stretch for the Lakers, and which way do you think it's going to go? It could go either way.
It's super crucial. Gosh, I wish I had written down like the all of the points that I wanted to address within that. One element of last year that isn't as present this year is, for as much as we were like, why the hell aren't they just playing their best players? The team that had just made the Western Conference Finals with a particular group, all of them dudes by February 1st, when that game happened, had all been benched aside from LeBron and AD,
Right.
you know? And there was an existing level of, part of the belief that I think remained was, if you just play your guys and just play the group of players that got us to the Western Conference Finals last year, we'll be in good shape. That is not as present this year, and that there is not as much like, obviously you should just start this guy instead type of thing. And so I'm a little concerned about that. And then I also think that there's an element to this season, and I hate doing analysis from this perspective because it can be projecting, but I think LeBron is sort of at a crossroads of his own
Mm-hmm.
that he wasn't at the same point last year. Like LeBron, all the way up until this year, this isn't the first year that he just started coasting occasionally in a game, but he could legit go 25, 10, and 7 in a game where he's just kind of cruising. And those games where he's doing that now, it's like, oh, is the 10-point streak going to break? And the move back to point guard has really struck me in the degree, and he got there in the Hawks game, right? And so maybe he found something there, but the degree that he's pressing a little bit almost, and this is again that the psychology that I don't want to, yeah, I don't want to pretend like
Sure.
I know this for sure, but there's a certain amount of like proving it to himself that it seems like that, hey, I'm still that guy that can be the on ball point guard, right? The guy that I've always been. And did you ever see the footage from what, I forget the show, but it had behind the scenes footage of the first game last year against Denver, and he's like, "You guys know that I can play point guard too, right?" He's like very spicy and
Mm-hmm.
sarcastic with Darvin, and Chris Gent comes over and puts his arm around him and all of that. But I know that there's an annoyance within LeBron of like, "Hey, I'm still the big dog, and I'm still the on ball type of guy." That his move to the point guard spot, I think, has sort of informed. So basically, this is a long-winded way of me saying that I think a lot of the breakthrough from like
Mm.
kind of the morass of December and January or not playing particularly well. And yes, this is a very important stretch. I think the breakthrough from that will be achieved in a different way than
Sure.
last year. I don't think it's that same formula or mix that you were talking about that was totally on point. I think it's more like LeBron finding
Mm.
within himself, but also what you're talking about like getting guys like D'Lo and Rui involved and like running stuff for them, giving D'Lo the ball, like not marginalizing them. I feel like they've been a little marginalized within the LeBron trying to prove himself type
Mm.
of dynamic that may be just a figment of my imagination.
No, I think that's a great point. It's almost, and he's going to have this extended break, right? It's almost like LeBron sabbatical time, go up to the mountain and find yourself again, and then
Right.
come back and the rain will fall or something. Like that's a great point. I think if there is a change, and it usually happens with LeBron, this time it's going to happen with whatever epiphany and come to Jesus moment that LeBron has of what he sees in the rest of the season, who he wants to be the rest of the season, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a great point. Okay, so I have a fun question for you before we get into the trade talk, and I queued you up to this earlier, but I listened to your last mailbag episode, and in passing, you had mentioned how Jared Vanderbilt and his availability these last 2 years or lack thereof has been one of your biggest, like, sort of the one that got away moments for this group. And I think a lot of Lakers fans resonate with that because the core was not meant to function without Vando, and we've never gotten to see the full extent of what happens when Austin Reaves and D'Angelo Russell are flanked by a legit elite perimeter defender. To the extent that we did see that, we rode that experiment out to the Western Conference Finals. Even if you want to call that run fluky, that is what happened. But along the same lines of that not having Vando being like a big what if, um, do you have any other big what ifs of the last 2 years about this current Lakers core that you sort of wonder about? Like, if this one thing had happened or hit, where would we be instead?
There are two things that I think just precede the last 2 years, but would have informed them significantly.
Mm.
One was giving Bruce Brown the Lonnie Walker contract. He was available for that. Then this
Oh,
last
was
year,
he?
uh-huh, that
Oh,
year, yeah, he was the
yeah.
one guy that I was like, "Oh, I wish we could have had Brown." And then we almost signed him. This isn't my second one, but then we almost signed him when he signed for Indiana. He was very close to signing with the Lakers for the MLE. Then he got that monster offer, and it was
You,
never
you know
worked
what's
out.
so funny? We didn't talk about this beforehand, but that was my big what if. What if Indiana had not signed Bruce Brown to a $20 million a year
Right,
contract? If they hadn't done that, I feel like the Lakers would have given Bruce Brown the full MLE
they would
that
have,
they
yeah.
ended up giving Gabe. So yeah, go ahead.
And then the other is another Indiana is Miles Turner, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they go after Turner, along aside from the Russ, remember those two trades were parallel at the time, and they went with Russ, and certainly that's one of those door A, door B. Like, what if they do Buddy Hield and Miles Turner instead? What does that look like? But there was another occasion where they were fairly close to closing on Turner for just 1 first. And
Mm.
Indiana backed out like fairly late in the process. I was like, that's probably mine. And so Brown is yours.
Yeah, Bruce Brown was mine, but since you've already brought that up, I have some other backup ones. But to your point about the Miles Turner thing, man, that was such a wild time because like Miles Turner was on like a podcast with Woj, and he was like, "Yeah, the Lakers should probably trade for me," and I'm like, "What are we doing here? This guy is saying you should trade for him." Anyways, since we already talked about the Bruce Brown one, I guess another big what if would be if the Lakers had done anything else besides drafting JHS with that pick.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, whether it's actually drafting another player who could have helped immediately that has value that you can reflip in this year's trade deadline if you want to reflip him at all, or
trade the
and I guess
pick.
this kind of coincides with another what if would be like if we had exercised Malik Beasley's team option along with Mo Bamba's team option and attached that 17th pick onto those contracts, what could we have gotten in that respect? And so I think that's my biggest what if. Like the JHS was just like a complete zero. We like a wasted opportunity. And you see how much things can flip when you actually get a guy like Dalton Connect the next year. And you're like, what if we had done something like that, or even just traded? We could have traded for the Dorian Finney-Smith the year before, and we wouldn't be talking about trading a premier non-LeBron James pick for Dorian Finney-Smith. So it's like, yeah, that's my that's my biggest what if.
That's a good one. That's a tough one. Like Cam Whitmore doesn't bother me as much because he was a
Sure.
medical thing where
Mhm.
teams were or the doctors were worried about his knee, and so that's why the Lakers didn't pass on him. But Pods or Jaquez, man, it's tough.
Yeah, for sure. All right. With regards to trading picks and whatnot, let's close this episode by talking about the trade deadline and some popular trade targets that Lakers fans have talked about over the last 5 years, it seems like at this point. But I wanted to get your thoughts on some of these players. So let's start here. What are your thoughts on Jonas Valanciunas? Obviously, sizing up and beefing up is never a bad thing. But is he the answer to the Lakers' woes? Because in my opinion, he isn't, or at least not just him, if we're getting Jonas Valanciunas. Jonas is 32 years old. He's slow-footed and not athletic, but he is big and burly, and he's kind of like more offensively versatile than most other bigs because he can extend
For
it out to
sure.
the three. In my opinion, I think fans have been a little too hyper-focused on stopping Nikola Jokic or trying to find an answer for Nikola Jokic that I feel like it's made them a little bit myopic in their search for a bulky big man to the
Yep.
point where all signs seem to lead to Jonas Valanciunas. And in my opinion, I think there are multiple ways to skin a cat. And I honestly subscribe to the notion that no one can stop Jokic, not even AD. So for me, the best way to stop Jokic is to stop everyone else around him and bother him and his team with motor athleticism and defensive IQ. And I think there are shorter, smaller bigs besides Valanciunas that can bother Jokic, who can sort of provide those things I mentioned, motor, athleticism, and defensive IQ a little bit better, while still freeing AD up to play free safety or man the back line. But what are your thoughts on Valanciunas?
No, I think you're spot on that. I think that to a degree, everybody wants a wing,
Mm,
and the best wing the Lakers can trade for is Anthony Davis, but they
mm,
need somebody who can fill his defensive role, and Valanciunas can't do that. And so I understand the wanting to focus on Jokic. I agree that being too myopic about that can get you in trouble. This was an old thing with Shaq, where teams would sign a player to bang with Shaq and they'd pay him too much money, and then Shaq would eat
mm.
his lunch in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I have bad news for everyone. Jonas Valanciunas cannot defend Nikola Jokic. Like, he's not
Yeah.
going to stop him. And just like
Yeah.
every superstar best player in the NBA, you need two players to defend him to be able to do that adequately. And so I do think to some degree, Jonas holding his ground down low with an armbar in
Sure.
Jonas's back or in Jokic's back, and then AD rotating over. That's a way to get there. But the problem with Valanciunas is that if you get him out into open space and defending ball screens, you become very vulnerable. And that's going to be the vast majority of the teams that we play, including Denver. They have plenty
Mhm.
of action to combat those slow-footed. They've got so much shooting, although not as much as they used to. they have so much shooting on the perimeter that they can really make you pay for that. So I am very much with you that there's more than one way to skin a cat. If we're trading for a five, it's essential to me that they can defend, that they are a defense first player, because that then frees up Anthony Davis to be more of a monster on the perimeter. Where if you look at the other 3-and-D type of options that I think we're going to talk about in a moment, it's like that guy's fine, but he's not going to make a huge difference. He's not good enough to,
Right. And I think too with Jonas, I'm kind of more concerned about like the macro, reshaping the macro identity of the Lakers. And with Jonas, he almost sort of emphasizes some of the worst qualities of this team with regards to being slow-footed and
Slow.
jogging back in transition. And I'm like, oh man, we might still have those 40-point blowout losses to teams
Of course, if you
because
don't
Jonas,
run.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know. So I'm kind of more focused on motor. So with regards to that, what are your thoughts about the more undersized, high motor athletic bigs? And I'll kind of lump them all together and you can talk about whichever ones you want to talk about. But for me, this kind of encapsulates a group including Isaiah Stewart, Day'Ron Sharpe, Jalen Smith, and Robert Williams. Maybe Jalen Smith is the least of this crew, but I kind of have liked what he's done with the Chicago Bulls from like an athletic standpoint and just like bringing that energy and running up and down the floor and being able to space from the 3-point line. But yeah, Isaiah Stewart, Day'Ron Sharpe, Jalen Smith, and Robert Williams.
I love me some beef stew. Putting aside the fact that he tried to murder LeBron a couple of
Sure.
years ago, I think he'd be a great fit. I was so impressed by him in the game against the Lakers in his
Yeah.
ability to show at the level of the screen and then get
Mhm.
back to the rim and get chest to chest with the guy, because he's not the tallest type of defender. So you better be able to haul ass on the ground as a five defensively, and he can do that. He's great motor, covers a lot of ground, can be that physical guy that can hold his ground down low while being able to run as well. That's kind of a rare combination. He's very
Mhm.
strong but also able to move his feet. Really like some beef stew. He's got some perimeter ability on offense. I'd be all over a trade for him. Day'Ron Sharpe I like, but I think he's more of a you don't trade a first for him, right? He's a
Sure.
JHS and a
Absolutely not.
second type of thing.
Yep.
Part of the value of him is the low dollar amount on his contract. You do not have to trade a rotation player just to get to him, to his cap
Mhm.
number, right? And so I like Sharpe. I think that he's got some all around ability, a little undersized but good wingspan, right? Jalen Smith I think is okay. He'd be probably my fourth of
Sure.
those four, and then Time Lord. That's the devil on my shoulder
I know.
is saying, I want to win the championship, Jonathan. Like if
Yeah.
you get me a guy that can, where it's like, oh, everything needs to work out, but if he's healthy, bro, Anthony Davis and Robert Williams
Yeah.
defensively would be so nasty. You get Vando back, everybody else can play offense, basically.
Right.
Just do your job type of stuff. But you have three game-changing type of defenders if Vando comes back and you
Mhm.
trade for him. Obviously, the health stuff is, the entirety of the argument, I think, against him. But that's way. Remember, we watched Bam and AD in the
Yep.
Olympics and how nasty that duo was,
Yep.
precisely because they could switch everything. You have two bigs that can protect the rim and defend the perimeter. You're in business if you can do that. And all the switching that Redick likes to do,
Mhm.
there you go.
Absolutely. I kind of liken Isaiah Stewart and AD to that same sort of dynamic as well, although Isaiah Stewart is less athletic and explosive than
Mhm.
Robert Williams and obviously shorter. But yeah, Robert Williams, I mean, what's funny, he's actually the closest one out of any of these guys who I've seen been able to guard Jokic, like just like one on one, like
Mhm.
guarding the post. So even from that perspective, you could say Robert Williams, if healthy, could probably do the best job, just straight up guarding Jokic. But yeah, so I 100% agree with you there. Let's move on to physical athletic guards. I don't know if you've thought about this player at all, and it's probably unlikely that we'll be able to get this guy because he's on a Western Conference competitor. But man, this dude is not playing at all for his current team. He's getting DNPs left and right. He was once like a promising like sophomore rising stars player, but Jayshawn Tate to me is probably, I don't know, he's like the best encapsulation of like a bully ball guard who this is like the Bruce Brown that nobody's talking about right now. He is so strong, he's so physical, but he's also got quick hands. And then on the offensive end, he can kind of do a little bit of everything as well. He gets rebounds, he can like very low volume hit some threes. He can actually pass the ball too. So Jayshawn Tate, and then I feel like this is Jayshawn Tate, and then maybe like an older version of Jayshawn Tate and Torrey Craig from the Bulls. These are all very cheap options, by the way. They are not going to cost first if we trade for them. But I also like Torrey Craig from the perspective that he's also kind of bulky as well. He's just a professional who he's actually pretty athletic too. So Jayshawn Tate, Torrey Craig, and then maybe like a more higher upside, like inexperienced player. But I also kind of like KJ Martin out of the Philadelphia 76ers just because of the energy, athleticism, and explosiveness that he brings. I think you could kind of mold him maybe into like a less versatile Josh Hart, in my opinion, who just crashes the boards. And then if you remember, he had that one like block on Dalton Connect when Dalton Connect tried to go for two. So yeah, your thoughts on those like physical athletic guards / wings in Jayshawn Tate, KJ Martin, and Torrey Craig?
So Jayshawn Tate was not a name I had considered. I've been all in the trade machine for the last couple of months, and just because the Rockets are competing for something,
Sure,
but
yeah,
like you said,
absolutely.
he's not getting run, right? And so from Houston's perspective, if they wanted to trade him, they'd probably want someone useful right now.
Right,
And maybe they look at who knows? I don't know if the Lakers have that type of player that they
right,
would
right.
also want to trade for Jayshawn Tate. I love it though. I think that's a great idea. He can pass a little bit too. He's one of those physical guys that can sort of do a bunch of different things. This need, Jonathan, I think that the starting two position takes more priority for me over the backup big, and it's precisely to the conversation that we had to lead off the show of should D'Lo start? Should it be the like D'Lo's the best of the options that we have currently on the team, but we're cycling through
Right.
these options where like I think a physical guard next to Austin is the most important thing, and that starting spot takes precedence over the backup five. I don't consider Craig to be a guard. I think he's more of a four, frankly.
Oh,
And
okay.
so yeah, so I wouldn't really consider him on that
Mhm.
front. The two, and it's funny because all of the names that I hear in the rumor mill, like media wise, I feel like there's always this like parallel rumor mill that has nothing to do with the Lakers are actually thinking or doing. And
Sure.
but everybody just rides with it. They make columns out and it just passes away. Like the two names that I think the Lakers should be looking at for the starting two spot are Malcolm Brogdon and Bruce Brown. Those are the two guys that
Mhm.
I think that will be available on the market. And if we need a starting two, and I really think that we do, you also might be able to get Brown without giving up a first. I don't
Right.
know, maybe. And maybe Brogdon as well. They're both injury issues as well. So KJ Martin, I very much like him too. Very bouncy guard out of Philly. They're a difficult team to make a trade with though because they're
Sure.
a second apron team, if I remember
Mhm.
correctly. And so
Right.
just like the mechanics of getting it done. So
Mhm.
I'd be into it. I just don't see it happening.
Right. Yeah, I think I like the concept of Malcolm Brogdon. Kind of like with Robert Williams. I'm not sure
Uh
if this
huh.
guy's ever going to be healthy, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I honestly wish for the both of those two players, Bruce Brown and Malcolm. I wish that they cost a little bit less in terms of the salary that they currently have because they're both like 20-ish million, right? So it's almost a little bit prohibitive and you're like, are we really going to downsize from Rui to these guys or I guess even D'Angelo Russell and then I don't know. I guess Malcolm Brogdon, if healthy, is the best of both worlds because you can send D'Angelo Russell out, and if he's healthy, he
I don't want to
does
keep D'Lo. I
the
don't want to
point
trade
guard.
D'Lo.
No, I agree with you. So it's a kind of like if they were making that Gabe Vincent salary,
Uh
then you're
huh.
like, okay, let's do it for sure. But it's
Would you
like
trade Max?
I would. You know what? Yeah, I would. Maybe the Wizards would do that, right? For like a flyer on Max Christie.
A,
I
a
had not
solid
thought of that
a solid
angle.
young talent signed to a cost controlled deal for the next 3 years after this one. I
Oh.
know, like Laker fans listening to trading Precious Max is verboten around here,
But
but
I like that angle. If you can give the Wizards like a flyer on Max Christie, and obviously Gabe Vincent is the main salary ballast there, and then throw in JHS, a flyer on JHS, you get there. Yeah, I know.
mhm.
I totally be down for that. Yeah,
You keep D'Lo. You got a
yeah,
starting backcourt
yeah.
of Austin and Brogdon.
Then you can really mix and match everything, kind of. So yeah, I like that. Okay, let's move on to the wings. If you want to talk about DFS and Cam Johnson, you can. I kind of want to stray away from them just because they're oft talked about and ask you about. So obviously with Vando, we kind of need to just move forward with the thought that he's not going to come back. And so I've been thinking of like who is that next 3 and D wing, not even 3 and D wing, just a wing who can defend that can sort of
Sure.
approximate what Vando does. And for me, I think this guy probably will cost way more now that he's been playing pretty well the last few games and we just recently saw him, but What are your thoughts on former Laker DeAndre Hunter? Because he was drafted by the Lakers.
Mhm.
And then I have two other names that aren't exactly wings, but they kind of bring the same sort of motor and energy that Vando provides. They're not point of attack defenders, but in terms of like length and motor, you can kind of get there with Vando. So DeAndre Hunter and then Chris Boucher out of the Toronto Raptors and Larry Nance out of the Hawks. Hawks is tricky. I mean, yeah, DeAndre Hunter and Larry Nance. The Hawks are tricky because they obviously own the Lakers pick, et cetera, et cetera. But moving that to the side and focusing on like the player templates, what are your thoughts on DeAndre Hunter, Chris Boucher, and Larry Nance, those types?
So I think Boucher and Nance are fives, and that's primarily
Yeah,
the position that they defend. I think that they're in the mix for that like guy who makes 10 million who could be our backup five, but isn't that big physical guy, but is maybe a little switchy. Uh, the DeAndre Hunter is like my number one guy.
oh, okay.
I'm like in to the point where he's kicking ass right now to a degree where I'm losing hope on the possibility that he will be
Mhm.
available. He also though fits in that certain level that do we want to extend him or not type of
Mhm.
space. I think he's got one more year on his deal. Anthony Simons is another guy. I was talking to somebody about Simons earlier, where that's how we got Rui. Remember, that's a
Right.
class of player where it's like he's coming off of his rookie deal. The team has to decide if they want to pay his next deal or not. Those guys are more available than I think they get run for. But
Sure.
I love me some DeAndre Hunter. He was great against us, and he's a two-way player. I'd be all over DeAndre Hunter.
So would you trade Rui and Gabe for Rui, Gabe, and a first for protected first for DeAndre Hunter and Nance?
Oh, absolutely. I'd do it for just
Okay.
Hunter.
You do it for just such okay, okay, cool. I
Absolutely.
would want to ask for Nance back, which I don't think they'd have any
Sure.
opposition to since
Yeah,
he's
yeah, yeah.
expiring and he's not even playing. So, man, if we could get those two guys, I feel like it would fundamentally change who the Lakers are almost. So,
I'd be surprised if you could get Hunter for less than an unprotected first and possibly a second first, or maybe at least seconds alongside of that.
sure.
I think he'd be a hot commodity.
I kind of view him though as like the PJ Washington of the Hawks because he is coming off the bench. I think they are
Sure.
showcasing him a little.
Mm.
So I don't know.
They
And,
drafted
and
Risa Shea. Sure, I could
right,
see it.
exactly. And the Lakers pick, I just want to hammer this home. The Lakers pick isn't even the types of first that the Mavericks trade. That is a non-LeBron James premium holographic first edition pick. And so I feel like you could get a DeAndre Hunter for that pick
Mhm.
if it was I think even if it was top four protected, this is to me this is the best. I mean, quite literally, this is the best firsts. The 2029, the 2030 first are the best first in the LeBron James and AD era because they won't have LeBron James and AD
Right.
attached to those years.
Yes, yeah, it's funny how the whole Anthony Davis, "Oh, Lakers are gonna be trash by the end of those." It's like, no, Lakers are still a, 45-ish win team, where you're drafting 17. And your point about like not every first is the same is super under discussed
Mhm,
in the it
exactly.
we talk about it as though, oh, one first is no, two first is better than one first. Sometimes one first is way better than your trash like
Ye-
future first from
yes.
OKC. Like,
Yes.
like that's not
That's what the Mavs did. They
right.
traded a pick swap for the 25th pick of this year's draft, which was nobody was lowly regarded to get Daniel Gafford.
Right.
That is
And
not the same as trading a non-LeBron James 2029 first for DFS. I
and
don't want to do that.
that's right. And that's the other aspect of it too is the protections and even the 27 pick that they sent to Utah
Right.
in the Russ deal. That's top four protected, so that
Mhm.
at least protects you from the Wemby is available and everyone knows this guy's going to be awesome, but you don't get him because you didn't protect your pick type of thing. And so yeah, that's another thing to consider with these firsts is levels of protection that of
Mhm.
course are going to be a big part of those discussions.
Okay, last player I want to talk about because we've run a little bit long, but this goes down to the ball handling two-way guard. You kind of already brought up Malcolm Brogdon, but I have a player here that I have coveted and loved. I call him White Rondo. But out of the Indiana Pacers, TJ
Oh,
McConnell,
oh yeah.
I feel like is the perfect sort of like connector piece off the bench, but randomly he's like had 31 points like the last game or something.
Mhm.
But like, yeah, I just feel like he also has like that grit and fight that people kind of have loved from guys like Alex Caruso and Larry Nance in the past, and even Austin Reaves. So yeah, well, Indiana is in a weird place right now because
They
they're
are.
struggling and they don't know what they want to do, whether they're going to be sellers or buyers. But yeah, would you would you like to get like a TJ McConnell sort of player?
I'd love me some TJ McConnell if he were in that Gabe Vincent role. I think it'd be perfect because it's basically the same job in a lot of ways, except he has way more on ball juice and just speed and all of that. And then one other guy from Indiana is just like Miles Turner is one of those expiring deals. Like in terms
That's
of
true.
deciding what if they want to be buyers or sellers, I would imagine they went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. So on February 8th or whenever the trade deadline is, are they going to be like, we're giving up on the season? Here's Miles Turner for your slop.
Right.
I don't see that happening really, but yeah, he's another guy to keep an eye on. Like the Indiana situation is certainly worth keeping an eye on, but yeah, I'd love me some TJ McConnell.
So they have been pretty open, to your point. They have been pretty open to possibly moving Obi Toppin. What do you consider Obi Toppin as? Is he a 4 or is he a 3? Or on the Lakers, does it matter?
Well, I don't think he's a perimeter defender, right? And I think that's basically the distinguisher on the Lakers is, can you guard the guy that LeBron's not going to guard?
Right.
And so I don't think the answer is like, I think you have some of the same problems that you have with Rui, although he's certainly a better athlete and kind of a more mobile, but he's more of a run and jump type of 4 than a, like, I'm going to slide my feet on the perimeter while having some ability of doing that. But yeah, I like Toppin. He'd be certainly, what does he make? Do you know offhand?
I think it's around like 10 million or so.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
It's not that prohibitive. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, Pete, thanks
Super
so much.
fun, man. Yeah.
Huh? These are fun. Yeah, I love doing, and I know you guys are going to have probably a trade show of your own coming up, since December 15th is next week, the date in which most free agents who signed in the offseason are eligible to be traded. And so hopefully some trade action begins to pick up, although historically substantial trades still don't happen till mid-January, right, because teams will continue to try and hold out for as much as they can till the deadline. So obviously the question becomes, can the Lakers continue to tread water till real reinforcements come? I work in the animation/writing industry, which means I haven't been working consistently. But the entertainment industry in general has been in the dumps for the last 3 years with, so many talented people out of work. And the banner phrase that we've been using this past 2024 year has been survive till 25. And I think that's the same banner phrase that Lakers fans are sort of going to have to, cling on to, because can the Lakers survive till 2025, which is actually, in a couple weeks. But yeah, hopefully it's unfortunately a sobering banner theme that we'll need to keep clinging on to for the next few weeks. But hopefully Redick, LeBron, AD, and the gang are game for it. And hopefully this extended rest period for LeBron will help sort of re-energize him and rejuvenate him for this stretch run into the trade deadline. I think, as you've been saying over the last few years, you kind of incrementally break up the season into these different parts that the Lakers sort of have to win, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Pete, thanks so much for hopping on. You want to plug anything? You don't need to plug anything at this point.
No, I just want to apologize. I realized I let the room get dark. I'm a mushroom, so I like sitting in the dark. So this pod started with me in the dark, and now I'm being a weirdo in the dark. So thanks for having me, for tolerating my eccentricities, and this was a blast, man. Let's do it again soon.
No, it was a blast. Pete, happy holidays. Let's get some wins before the new year.
Let's do it. Go Lakers.
Go Lakers.